In this video, we're going to be talking about the QuickBooks Online chart of accounts. Specifically, we're going to talk about the default accounts that come with QuickBooks Online when you set up a brand new account. We're going to talk about deleting those accounts, and we're also going to discuss importing a chart of accounts if we already have an Excel spreadsheet with those accounts that we can just import. So here I have a brand new company file with no information I just created. I'm going to click on the accounting tab on the left hand side and then on chart of accounts. I can also get to the chart of accounts by clicking on the gear menu and then clicking on chart of accounts. Both ways will get me to the same screen. When you first open the chart of accounts, it will ask you to click on that button that says see chart of accounts, and then you will have a couple of accounts that get created by default. Now, in some cases, the accounts that are created by default are useful, and sometimes not really. So what I like to do is I like to delete all the accounts that are created by default and then import my own chart of accounts that I have in a spreadsheet. So inside of the chart of accounts, I'm going to click on the little triangle right next to the view register or run report link under the action column. And then I'm going to click on that little triangle and then I'm going to click on make inactive and then hit yes. Now, in some cases, QuickBooks will not allow you to make certain accounts inactive. You will be left with about 5 accounts that you cannot make inactive, so just go to the next one. I'll just go down the list and finish them all. And once that I'm finished, I will be left with 5 accounts that I just can't remove, which is uncategorized asset, retained earnings, sales, uncategorized income, and uncategorized expenses. QuickBooks just uses those categories for its own internal processing, so you just cannot get rid of them. Now, if I wanted to create the chart of accounts from scratch, I just go to the new button on the top right. Then once I click on the new button, I'm first going to click on the type. So notice how many different types we have. We have accounts receivable, other current assets, bank, fixed assets, and other assets. Those are all assets that go on the balance sheet. Then we have accounts payable, credit card, other current liabilities, long-term liabilities. Those are all liabilities that also go on the balance sheet. Then we have equity, which is that last group that goes in the balance sheet. And then everything under equity is going to go in the profit and loss. So we're going to have income, other income, cost of goods sold, expenses, and other expenses. Every account needs to fit one of those categories because QuickBooks needs to know in what report to put it as. So is it going to be putting it in the balance sheet or in the profit and loss? You may want to check out a different video where I explain some accounting basics, where I explain sort of the logic and how that works. But this video is focused on chart of accounts only. Anyway, so once you pick the category you want, so let's pick the most common expenses. The next question is what is the detail type? Now the detail type, it's a little bit confusing because whatever you pick there bears no impact in your financial statements. As a matter of fact, the fact that detail type is there, it's a very quirky, unique thing to QuickBooks Online. And if you pick the wrong detail type category, again, it will have no impact in your financial statements. However, that is really designed to help sort of the non-accounting new user pick a category from there when they don't know what they're looking for. So what the detail type allows you to do is to click on the drop-down menu and maybe see kind of what you were looking for and then pick it from there. So if I actually find something I'm looking for, like legal and professional fees, I can click on that. And then I get a little sort of a cheat sheet or a hint that maybe guides me to the process and might stop me from creating the wrong account, or it might confirm that I'm creating the correct account. So once you pick the detail type, QuickBooks will automatically type that same name here where it says name. Now I can change that if I want to. So if I want to change that to accounting fees or something like that, I can do that. But again, the purpose of the detail type is an attempt to guide a new user through the process of creating accounts, giving them a hint, and then maybe suggesting a name. So you can sit there if you're an advanced user, create the accounts you want based on your business needs. Or the other option that you have is, I'm going to click on X here, it's imported from a spreadsheet. So if you happen to have a spreadsheet of this perfect chart of accounts that works for your business, you can actually import it pretty easily. Now I'm going to bring a spreadsheet here that I have. And this spreadsheet I created basically to mimic every single default account that QuickBooks has available. So if you actually go to that list of new accounts and create every single one of those options, it's going to be on this spreadsheet. Now, this spreadsheet is a great start to have a starting point for a chart of accounts. I'm going to put a link in the description below where you can see all these names and descriptions on one of my websites. So you can copy and paste the information from there, or you can actually purchase the spreadsheet if you want to import from a spreadsheet directly and you don't want to take the time to build your own spreadsheet. So this spreadsheet contains about 178 accounts, and they're based on the default options that QuickBooks gives you when you create a new account. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not perfect, but it's a great starting point. So it has a whole bunch of expense categories, other assets, other liabilities, equity, income, all of those things. And it does make it a lot easier for you to have a way to get started. And if you're going to import it from the spreadsheet, you can actually delete any of the lines that you don't want in Excel first before you import it into QuickBooks. So it's actually a much easier way to bring a chart of accounts into QuickBooks. You open your spreadsheet, you go through them, you read all the descriptions, you figure out which ones really have nothing to do with your business and just delete them. Just right click on each one and click on delete, right? If you're using Excel for Mac or PC, either one should work. You can just delete them. So once you finished deleting all the ones you don't want and you save the spreadsheet somewhere on the computer, then I can go back into QuickBooks Online and do an import. So let me show you how that works. I'm going to click on the gear menu on the top right, and then I'm going to click on import data. So gear menu, import data. So once I click on import data, it's going to give me a couple of choices. One of them is chart of accounts. So I'm going to click on that chart of accounts button, and then it's going to take me to a next screen, which is going to say, okay, here you can import or upload your Excel file. Now notice that if I click on download sample file, it will download a separate Excel file, which is going to be a template for you to use. So you can also, if you want to, you can build your own chart of accounts using the default template. You don't have to buy anybody's spreadsheet or anything like that to be able to build your own chart of accounts. However, this will require you to type this manually. If you've never done this before, some of the categories and detail type is just going to get a bit confusing. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, and I'm going to upload the spreadsheet I was just talking about. So I'm going to click on browse. Then I'm going to click on my spreadsheet here on the computer. Then I'll click on open. And then I'm going to click on next. Then it's going to ask me to do mapping. So detail type, name, number, and type. Now I didn't put any account numbers on this spreadsheet on purpose. In the package that I sell with different chart of accounts, there's actually different versions of the spreadsheet, and there's one that has all numbers. So if you want to import with numbers, that's going to be in that package as well. The one I'm doing now is without numbers because I don't want to confuse the user. So we're going to omit this whole concept of account numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and click on next. And then after you click import, it will tell you here how many it was able to successfully import. So I created some errors in it just so I can show you. So if you see red on the first column, that means that the account cannot be imported because the account name is either too long, invalid, or maybe it's a duplicate, it's already in the chart of accounts. If the red is here under type, that means that your type was wrong in your spreadsheet. Or if the red is here on the detail type, that means the detail type here was wrong in the spreadsheet. You can actually change them on the fly one by one if you have any errors on this screen. So I'm going to close this and then go to my chart of accounts. So when I go back into the chart of accounts, there's about 172 accounts that were imported plus the 5 or so that were there by default. So here's all the accounts that were imported. Every single account that was on my spreadsheet was imported into here. And then we can actually go into the reports and see exactly what that looks like. So I'm going to click on the reports menu. Then I'm going to click on profit and loss. And before I run the report, I'm just going to create a transaction. So QuickBooks starts posting a transaction into the financial statements. So I'm going to go into vendors expense, and I'll put a transaction. Doesn't matter what category I'll put $0 value here, and then I'll click on save and close. So as soon as I create one transaction, I can now click on dates all. And remember, there's no data on this QuickBooks file. But if I do all dates, and then I click on where it says show none, zero, or active only, put all in both rows and columns, and then I click on run, and it's going to show me the entire profit and loss with every single profit and loss account that is in here. I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to click on customize on the top right and remove excerpt zero amounts, and then click on run. That's going to show me a whole bunch of zeros. It might make it just a little bit easier to read on the screen. So I'm going to collapse these accounts real quick just so we can see them at a really high level. So I'm going to collapse income, cost of goods sold, expenses, other income, and other expenses. So now my profit and loss is in this really high level view, which is just the account type category. So we have income, cost of goods sold, expenses, other income, and other expenses. So let's open one by one. I'm going to go ahead and click on the little triangle and open income. And these were the income categories that were created. Discounts, refunds given, non-profit income, other primary income, sales. That's a default account, by the way. Sales of product income, sales service income, unapplied cash payment income, and uncategorized income. So again, if you don't want any of these, you go in the chart of accounts and make them inactive, or delete them on the spreadsheet before you import them. So I'm going to collapse income and expand cost of goods sold. Notice that there's about 7 cost of goods sold accounts here that you could use. I'm going to go ahead and collapse that. Go to expenses. Notice there's a whole bunch of expense categories here. A couple of the ones that I deleted from the beginning, they're still going to show there because they were created by default. But once you remove that show all option, which is going to be the natural way you look at a financial statement once you have numbers, you're not going to see them anymore. So don't let those bother you. But for the most part, you're going to see most of the accounts that were imported here, or you're going to see all the accounts that were imported here. A couple of extra ones that I created special in my chart of accounts. I created the subcategories under auto. So we have auto insurance, lease payment, auto repairs and maintenance, fuel, mileage reimbursement, and parking and tolls. I created that because QuickBooks doesn't give you the option to do sub accounts. I also created the sub accounts under payroll expenses. So I broke down compensation of officers, payroll taxes, salaries and wages for non-officers, and workers' comp, which is for workers' comp insurance. And you can create those subcategories for any of the categories you really want. For travel, usually people break down airfare, transportation, hotel, travel meals, that sort of thing. So you can do that. And you can actually do that breakdown in any of the categories that you want. Now, for all these ones that say deleted, again, you could have left them and not deleted them at the beginning before the import. That's really up to you. And you're not going to see those deleted ones again when you're actually running reports like normal. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse the expense categories and then go down to other income. I notice there's a couple of options here: dividend income, interest income, other investment income, other miscellaneous income, and tax exempt interest. Again, if you don't need any of those, go to the chart of accounts and delete it. Let's look at other expenses, because I actually don't love these categories. These were the ones that QuickBooks suggests by default, so I included them in my spreadsheet. But in the other expenses, you're going to have a couple of legitimate business other expenses like amortization, depreciation, exchange gain and loss, penalties and settlements, and really that's it. And everything else you see there, it's quasi-personal stuff. So the reason why QuickBooks suggests that you create the quasi-personal accounts is because many business owners tend to mix business and personal. So if you want to track things like your home office and or all expenses related to your house or your office, such as home office expense or homeowner's rental insurance, mortgage interest, that sort of thing, you want to put it there so the tax person can actually see them as a different category. So hopefully from there, they'll pick them out and make the splits or the separation of personal and business, take out the amounts that were deductible, non-deductible, that sort of thing. I personally would prefer to leave those out completely. So it's up to you to delete them on the spreadsheet before you import them. And these are all the ones that are under other expenses. Again, the only things that should be under other expenses is amortization, depreciation, exchange, gain and loss for foreign exchange, and penalties and settlements. Everything else is sort of quasi personal vehicle, personal office type of stuff. So I normally wouldn't recommend it, but it's on my spreadsheet just in case. So that's the profit and loss. Let me go to the balance sheet. I'm going to click on reports and then on balance sheet. And then I'm going to click on dates and I'll click on all dates. And then again, the same thing under show none, zero, active only. I'll click on all and all on both. And then I'll click on run reports. I'll do the same thing with the zeros. I'll click on customize on the top right and then on accept zero amounts. Then I click on run. So it shows me the zeros. Again, a little bit easier to read. So I'm going to collapse all these again the same way. So I collapse all the assets, liabilities, and equity. Let me expand assets and then I'll collapse the sub account types here. So we have three major account types under assets: current assets, fixed assets, and other assets. So I'll start with current assets. And in here, we're going to have bank accounts, accounts receivable, other current assets. So three sub account types per se. So when I open bank accounts, it's all the different names that you can give bank accounts, but typically you're going to have a bank account for each actual account that you have. So even though by default it has cash on hand, checking, money market, these are just examples to guide you through the process. Let me collapse that and let me open accounts receivable. There should only be one accounts receivable account, which is the default one. When you create a new invoice, that's going to go in there. So we'll go ahead and collapse that. And under other current asset, there's a lot of options here. So we have allowance for bad debt, development cost, employee cash advances. Again, if you don't know what any of these things mean, refer back to my website. There's a page where all these descriptions, you can see them on the website itself. Or if you have the spreadsheet, you can search them through the spreadsheet, all the explanations of what every one of these accounts, it's on the spreadsheet and on the website. So that will be useful for you. So again, delete the ones that are not relevant to your business, the ones that you're not going to use. So I'll collapse other current assets, collapse current assets altogether, and then open fixed assets. So look at the different options we have here. So we have accumulated amortization, depreciation, buildings, computers, copiers, furniture, software, equipment, furniture and fixtures, intangible assets, land, buildings, machinery, all that stuff is in here. And these are going to be for your assets that you purchase that are going to have permanent value for your business. So I'll collapse fixed assets and open other assets. Look at the things that we have here. You have accumulated amortization, goodwill, lease buyout, licenses, organizational costs, security deposits, other things in there. So I'm going to collapse that and close assets altogether. So I'll expand liabilities and equity and then collapse the two categories. So I'll open liabilities first, collapse the three subcategories here, or the two, current liabilities and long-term. I'll start with current liabilities. So we have our accounts payable. These are for our bills that we entered in QuickBooks that we're going to be paying later. Then we have our credit cards. There's one credit card account in there. Of course, you will create every single credit card you have for your business. Then you have current liabilities such as federal income tax that you owe, insurance that you owe, line of credit balances, loan payables, other current liabilities, payroll clearing, payroll tax payable, sales tax payable, all these sorts of things. So I'm going to collapse that, open long-term liabilities, which is going to have notes payable, which are bank loans, other long-term liabilities. These are for the ones that don't fit any of these two categories, and then maybe loans to a shareholder. So I'll collapse that and collapse liabilities altogether and expand equity. So under equity, there's a lot of accounts. Again, you really don't need that many accounts under equity. Typically, you're really going to need is net income, which you can't change. That's a default sort of hidden account. Retained earnings, you can't change that. That's a default account. And then you're going to have something like owner's pay, owner's equity, owner's investment, which is where when the owner puts money in the business or takes money out of the business. Now, depending on the type of company, whether you have an S Corp, C Corp, or partnership, They're going to have different terminology in here. Again, refer to the website for the descriptions and the spreadsheet to understand what these things under equity mean. And generally, you're only going to have like 4 or 5 from equity in here. So that's it. That's how you take your original chart of accounts, delete accounts, add new ones using the detail type option that QuickBooks gives you, or import with your own spreadsheet or my spreadsheet your own chart of accounts. And chart of accounts are crucial to using QuickBooks and having a good QuickBooks usage experience. For the most part, for most of my customers that call me that need help with QuickBooks, a lot of the problems were derived from a bad chart of accounts, duplicate confusing entries, and then the users were basically categorizing things wrong because it wasn't designed for them to understand it or for their needs. Now, in many cases, a default spreadsheet could help, and in many cases, you need a professional like myself or any other QuickBooks expert to kind of walk you through the process of creating a custom chart of accounts that works best for your business. So you can try this on your own if you're not an accounting professional, or if it doesn't work, consider working with a QuickBooks expert that can help you through this process. So hopefully this was helpful. Hit like, subscribe, add some comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.